Today is going to be a little different. It's afternoon. You don't know that when you're watching this, but it is. And I'm going to talk about Taoism. You've been looking at your textbook, I hope, and it feels like Chinese tradition's just sort of thrown at you. A whole bunch of stuff. A whole bunch of names that are kind of hard to wrap your mind around. A whole bunch of ideas that like Li or Qi or whatever we want to throw in there, Tian. And you're trying to figure out, what are these people doing? You know a good thing to do? Let's talk about it in everyday English. It seems to me that in religion, we use language, it's religious language, and in the process, no matter which religion we're talking about, we tend to throw up a wall between us and others. Language is hiding something, not just revealing something. So, if you were to ask a Christian, let's say, what's this Jesus thing all about? A Christian might say something like, He died for my sins. And that sounds like a nice, simple, straightforward statement until you start thinking, what do you mean, sin? Exactly what is that? Is that ignorance? Is that moral failing? Is that a status of humanity? We're all mortal. There's been so many different definitions of what sin is in Christianity that you have to kind of make sure you're talking about the same thing. Let's pull the word out and talk about it. We're all gonna die. Or we're all really stinky little wretches. Or something. I mean, come up with some way to speak about it in plain English. And then say what it means to say, died for my sins. Died for my sins. In order to make them okay? In order to get me to stop something? In order to inspire me? In order to change my status somehow? All kinds of ways to understand He died for my sins. And that's the one that's all around us. We think we understand that. Now we turn to Taoism. And you're completely lost in the language. Until somebody just puts it in plain, simple terms. Do you remember back in the death section, when we did that one a while back, that death video? The question was, do you want to be old? Now, maybe you don't want to be 200 years old. That's that discussion, not this one. But I'd say most of us don't want to die at the age of 30. The Who said they did back there in the 60s, and now all those guys are in their 70s and just happy about that. So no, most people, not absolutely everybody, but most people would say, yeah, I'd like to live to a ripe old age. I want to get the most out of my life. There you go. That's Taoism. That's the goal of Taoism. If Buddhism is about being happy, Taoism is about living long. You can see why you can put them together. A Taoist Buddhist is somebody who's going to be happy in a very long life. So, the question is, how do you get to that? It's not as mysterious as you think. There is a Taoist religion. But mostly when people talk about Taoism, they're talking about Taoist philosophy. And just like any other philosophy, Aristotelian philosophy, or humanist philosophy, or existentialist philosophy, you don't have to buy a religious system. You just think what works in here, what makes sense, and that's Taoism too. Taoism says you want to live to be old? Here's two things to remember. First, the universe is a giant power grid. That's right, and on a literal level, that's true. Science now understands that from one end of the universe to the other, energy is flowing through in a web of connections and wirings. Some of that wiring, of course, is one kind of force, and some of it is another kind of force, and some of it's forces we don't understand. But the power grid, it's just a simple model. You know, like you have the power grid of the valley is built around the power plant. And out of that power plant go wires that go out and come back in a grid. And it spreads across the valley, and that's how we get electricity from here to there. And if the grid is working well, we're not wasting electricity. You get the idea, right? That's the universe. And you're a part of that universe. And so you should fit into that grid, and that energy should be able to flow right through you. And if it's not flowing right through you, something's wrong. We can fix that. Don't go getting spiritual on me, because it's not that hard. And then the other piece, that's the Tao, by the way. Tao, T-A-O. This is the book that we talk about, the Tao Te Ching. Only this is only one translation of the Tao Te Ching. You notice it's spelled T-A-O, T-E-C-H-I-N-G. You'll find it more often nowadays as Daodejing, because that's the way it sounds. I don't know who had that old system worked out that T sounded like duh and a P sounded like buh. And in Beijing, the city that's the capital of China, was spelled Peking, and we all said Peking, and we were wrong. So they changed the system about 40 years ago. We have the Tao Te Ching, and the first line in the Tao Te Ching is, the Tao that can be spoken is not Tao. Let that sink in for just a second. All it really comes down to is the universe is too freaking big for you to understand the power grid. If this thing is this giant infrastructure, there's a pattern to this whole thing. Everything is interconnected some way or another, and you can have a blast exploring that. But you're never going to wrap your mind around it. You can kind of intuit that it's there. But do you really need to understand the power grid of the valley in order to flip your light switch on in your living room? Nah. You just need to know there's a power grid there. And you want to make sure you're not messing up the power grid. Now, on the other side of it, a nuclear power plant, a whole bunch of wires and cables and everything going out and coming back in, is all fine and good, but if you don't turn the power on, all it is an infrastructure. The infrastructure is Tao. The energy is Qi. Qi is the energy that runs through the cosmos. It's the energy that runs through us. Qi is like the electricity on the power grid. It's not the power grid, but it's what the power grid communicates. Now, you want that electricity to run through you just as smoothly as possible, because if it does, you'll live to be old. And if it doesn't, you die young. That's Taoism in a nutshell. Let's see if we can focus this a little bit. I'm thinking that every single one of us has kind of what we'll call a Qi package, but I'm going to change that to a longevity package. It's given to you by your DNA. If your mom's side of the family all lives into their 80s and 90s, and your dad's side of the family all lives into their 80s and 90s, you probably have a longevity package of 80s to 90s. Remember that question, is there a time to die? Well, on some level it's true. Our genetics give us a maximum. So if your longevity package is 96, there's probably not much you're going to be able to do to get it to be 127. But 96 is a possibility. On the other hand, you all know that if your mom and her side of the family all died at the age of 48, and your dad and everybody in his family died in their 50s, you're going to be lucky to get a longevity package of 55 or 60, right? So, whichever one you have, you certainly want to use it as wisely as possible in order to get the most out of it. You all know that you can have a 96-year longevity package and just mess that thing up badly. You smoke heavily, you drink heavily, you eat lots and lots of deep-fried foods, you do no exercise, you get yourself weighing 645 pounds, work a high-stress job, put yourself in a rotten relationship. How long do you think you're going to live? You'll be dead by 45 too. On the other hand, if you maximize it, you eat right, you live right, you put yourself in the right kind of context, all you're doing is letting the universe's energy flow right through you. I'm thinking there are 3 dimensions that Taoism works on. One of them is food, one of them is your lifestyle, and one of them is your environment. So let's take those. Food. We just got done talking vegetarianism. Yeah, and most Taoists are vegetarians. The reality is that meat is very hard on our system. If you eat a pound steak and you sit there and feel what that's like in your body as it tries to digest that, you know what they're talking about. So if you want to maximize your energy, let that energy flow through you, you eat what your body most easily digests and what your body needs to restore all of its vitamins and chemicals and so on and so on. That's easy enough to say. Let's imagine this. You eat a big, cheesy, meaty dish, and the next day, you've been in the bathroom for like 30 minutes, and you don't even have a book. Think about how much energy you're expending trying to get just that to go through you. You know, some people come out after that experience and they need a nap to recover. This cannot be good. And looking at what happens with heart attacks and strokes and cancers, it's not. On the other hand, if you can walk into that bathroom with a book in your hand and 2 minutes later you walk out and go, God, I can barely get through page 1, all of a sudden, whoosh, I'm done. That's good for you. The energy's flowing through you just like that was. You don't need a nap, you feel refreshed. You want to go out and play some basketball. This is the idea behind eating right. You know, there are certain foods that really make your body sing. 10 magic foods out there, they say. You know, broccoli. Eat broccoli. You'll never get colon cancer if you eat broccoli a couple times a week. Eat pomegranates. Those pomegranate seeds have something in them that really helps you out. Drink some green tea. Eat some blueberries. Have some almonds. There are certain magic foods that if you just incorporate them a couple of times in your week, 3 tablespoons of olive oil a day, your cholesterol level drops. And you make your body just smooth as all get out. All right, so food, wait, one more thing I want to say. It's not just what you eat, it's what you eat it with. The Taoists spent 2,200 years figuring all this food thing out, and they figured out that a food by itself is okay, cinnamon, but another food with it makes it even better. So that you take garbanzo beans. They're just garbanzo beans. Take sesame seeds. What do those do for you? Put the 2 of them together and make some hummus. Now you got a perfect protein. So, learning to combine the right foods, garlic with chilies, and so on, makes your body work especially well. They also recognize that there are different kinds of people. Some people are going to do great with chili, and some people their bodies are just going, what are you doing to me here? Yeah, we all have a slightly different metabolism and a different makeup in our digestive process. And so what's right for one person, a water person, isn't right for another who's a fire person. They have those cool categories, water, fire, wood, metal, you know, that kind of thing. But don't get hung up on those terms. Just recognize that your brother might really do well on chilies and you just get a stomachache every time. You might really do great with coffee and somebody you know always gets, the jitters when they do it. Have a cup of coffee. We're different, and so you got to figure out what works with your system. When you finally figure it out, let your system flow. Next part, your lifestyle. They figured out that, certain jobs, for instance, high stress. Being a political advisor was one of the ones they talked about a lot. Not a good job for longevity. But neither is being a stockbroker. And neither is being a lot of other jobs in our society. Those high-stress jobs that expect 60, 65 hours a week and you always feel like you're on edge, they're killing you. A stockbroker might be a lot of fun, but at the age of 47, when you have a heart attack and you're dead, that's what they're saying. On the other hand, my job is great. Teachers live to be really old. All my college teachers seem to have lived at least into their 70s. A lot of them live into their 80s. And I got a bunch of teachers from graduate school that are in their 90s at this point. There must be something good about this since we only have about 2 or 3 days of stress during grading time every semester. And the rest of life is just talking with you guys. So find a job where the energy level is flowing through you, where the universe's energy plant is making the energy instead of you having to manufacture it all the time. And the last thing I want to throw in here is about your environment. This would be what we'll call a feng shui thing. You know very well that if you live in a dark, dingy little apartment in a crowded city and the window opens up to a wall in the next apartment 6 feet away from you, that you're probably not going to be a happy camper. And if you're not a happy camper, you're probably not going to live to be very old. On the other hand, if you live in a house that's on a little hill with big picture windows overlooking the lake and the trees, and you see the morning sunrise every morning when you look out that big window with your cup of tea, you're probably going to get the most out of it. We need to situate ourselves. Big cities, rural areas. We got to think about this better. And then within the context of your house, you don't want a house that doesn't have a lot of windows. So put a skylight in there someplace. Give yourself a view. Plant a garden outside your back door. Do something to enhance the atmosphere. It's a feng shui thing. I want to throw in one last little piece because I'm about to run out of time, and I am going to make it under 15 minutes. Your lifestyle includes your relationships. If you're in a really crappy relationship that's pulling you down, get out. Because you'll die younger. Unless you're willing to die for that person. Here's another trick. Men who are married, on average, live longer than men who aren't. And women who are married, on average, die younger than women who aren't. Try to figure out how those things go together. Put this package, your foods, your lifestyle, your environment. Try to find a way to just sort of let the river take you instead of feeling like you always have to swim upstream with that thing. That's Taoism.